Welcome back. It's 10 minutes past the top of the hour. Thank you for staying with Checkpoint. It's now time for a second conversation. And just this week, we discovered that it's hard being President Ruto. The president, in response to those who are opposed to his government projects, has changed his tone from a persuasive one to openly rebuking his critics. Now, whether or not you've been to an airport, that's a story for another day. But keen to note, there are those who think that the president is being criticized solely because he belongs to the Kalenjin ethnicity. As that spurs a conversation online, we've seen Kiambu Senator Karungo Wathang'wa proposing changes to the National Police Service Act where he wants to compel DCI officers to brand their vehicles in order to enhance accountability. Equally, we'll highlight the concerns stemming from the problems at the IEBC or lack thereof. And not just that, we'll focus on the renewed push by members of parliament to amend the constitution in a bid to entrench the national government constituency development funds. So let's get right to it. I have the pleasure of hosting Fanya Mambo Kinuthia, a lawyer. Karibu sana. It's always a pleasure to have you with us. Asante for your time, and equally joined by policy and political analyst Javas Bigambo. Karibu sana, it's great to have you.
Great, thank you, Jesse. I'm happy to be here.
I'm tempted to ask if you guys are just from the airport or if you've never been there. Story for another day. Anyway, let's begin with the first issue, and it stems from a couple of sentiments that have been shared by the Supreme Court of Kenya Judge Justice Isaac Lenaola, where he highlighted the delays in reconstituting the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission. Listen in.
Passing legislation very quickly on other subjects that are politically important, but we don't look at what is extremely important for this country. The Electoral Commission. How can a country like ours stand on its feet if it does not have an Electoral Commission?
So how can a country like ours stand on its feet without an electoral commission? There are those who argue that we're staring at not just an electoral, but a constitutional crisis, where the commissionerless IEBC has actually gone to court to seek advisory from the Supreme Court to determine whether they can continue with the process of delimitation of boundaries, and equally, they wanted to see if they can review constitutional timelines for that review to be extended. It was supposed to have happened by March 2024. Fanya Mambo, what sort of crisis are we looking at the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission? Is it a legal crisis, as the politicians argue, or a political crisis, as some members of the judiciary might allude to?
I am looking at a member of the judiciary, and a senior member at that, of the judiciary, telling us that the ruling that was made by the judiciary about one Kithure Kindiki could have been wrong, because he is saying Kenya doesn't have IEBC. And from what we were entertained to during the time when we were watching the impeachment process for Rigiji, we remember the president's appointment letter for Kindiki saying that having consulted IEBC, which IEBC? The one that one of the judges is saying is not constituted and is not there. I think in my humble submission, ile IEBC lipitisha Kindiki ifanye boundaries. Na ile IEBC lipitisha Kindiki ifanye by-elections in all those remaining wards. Otherwise, if it can't do that, then we should call the Kindiki appointment null and void. We can't say on one hand that IEBC is okay and complete and it can clear Kindiki, or it's not necessary for him, but then on the other hand, we come and say it's needed when we are doing boundary delimitation.
But to clear such a person, do you need a commission? Do you need the commissioners present?
Who is the returning officer for the presidential election?
Oh, yeah.
It's the chairman of the IEBC, and the deputy president and the president fall within the same ambit. From where we sit, I think it's basically telling us that we are in a mess. And let me tell you, the millennials and the Gen Zs have refused to look at it from the eyes of the legal point of view. We have decided to look at it from 2027 lens. And we are saying, but they go ahead and look for 9 villagers from the village that you like the most, people who you think are very loyal to you, 9 of them, they can even speak the same language, make them commissioners. those people who want to remove this administration through the ballot will still remove it. So Kenyans are telling you, even if you went and selected 9 people who are born of the same mother, speak the same language, from the same village, and you made them commissioners, those people who want a democratic election, we shall vote so overwhelmingly against this administration that it won't matter who is a commissioner. So go ahead and appoint IBC tomorrow. I don't even know why political parties are worried about who is going to be commissioner. I am telling you, if it's Kalonzo who is the problem, or it's whoever, Raila, whoever, just go and get 9 people from your own village and put them there. We just want an electoral commission.
Tell me this before.
At this rate, we just want an electoral commission.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, the votes will be so many for what we want that it will be hard. And it's good because now when you have people who are loyal to you telling you, Mister, hizi kura zimepigwa huku haziwezi ibika. Hata kama tuko na watu wetu.
So is this a legal or a political crisis?
It's a political crisis.
Political crisis.
Because it's the politicians who are impeding the process of having IBC.
Okay, it's not the court cases.
It's not the court cases.
Okay, interesting, because the deputy president today was alluding to the fact that guys are rushing to court and that's why there's a delay. Jarvis, as you come in, are our legislators guilty as charged by Justice Lenaola that perhaps they're too efficient when passing political related legislation pieces, but when it comes to matters of national interest like the IEBC, there's lackluster approach. They're a little bit slow, yeah?
Well, I would not struggle to agree with Justice Lenaola. I would not struggle at all. When you look at the dramatization of bills in Parliament and what it is that is prioritized by the National Assembly or the Senate, one may come or arrive at an easy conclusion that our legislators have got inverted priorities when it comes to bills that matter, and those that may be critical or very important to certain policy issues, national progress for the greater good of all, are not driven through the House with the meteoric speed that political interest bills are passed in the House. And so I agree with the Pune judge when he says that Parliament is prioritizing political issues at the expense of national good kind of bills. And I think it may be important that our politicians really get to appreciate the seriousness of the 3 mandates that they have. Remember that Parliament is a 3-legged stool. And these 3 legs, of course, as we know, the mandate of the responsibilities of parliamentarians, representation, oversight, legislation. And when you look at it, nearly every Kenyan is not satisfied with the manner in which all these 3 are being handled by Parliament. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. So, all things said and done, do you think there's goodwill in terms of constituting IEBC? Because blame game is ongoing right now. If you talk to Kalonzo Musyoka, he says, actually today he mentioned that, you know what, Kenya Kwanza sort of came into this process when it comes to the IEBC selection panel, and there's a little bit of push and pull when it comes to one of the names that were fronted by Azimio. When you talk to the judges, they mentioned that, you know what, maybe these politicians are not too focused on reconstituting IEBC. It's not a matter of priority. So is there goodwill or is there a lack of it?
The Honorable Musyoka's approach, I think, is a bit reductionist.
Yeah.
It is not so much about yes, there is the issue of the political goodwill that is necessary for this, because it's a political process. And you even recall how the issue of NADCO came up, and the recommendations, and the issue of having the selection panel.
Increasing the members, yeah.
Yes. And in fact, earlier, before that, there was the issue of Honorable Raila Odinga and President William Ruto agreeing on the issue of having a selection panel. We need to take issues very seriously here. Politics has been given so much priority over substantive issues of national interest. Secondly, on this matter that is presently active in court, the political parties liaison committee and the representative thereof for that committee. That matter is in court. Whether we like it or not, we cannot have that panel seat or constituted overriding the matter that is in court today.
Okay.
But also, I think in terms of balance of interests and issues, just the same way the court sat on a day-to-day basis over the impeachment of Rigathi Gachagua, former DP, it may be important that on critical matters, such as, for example, the issue or determining the issue of the selection panel, why can't the court expedite and deal with this issue? Because, look, do you know that, and we all appreciate the fact, that some people within wards, some constituency, is unrepresented right now?
Yeah. An
issue that is not contemplated by the Constitution. And so I think it may be important for the court to see how to expedite dealing with this dispute over the IEBC selection panel.
Okay, and before we come to Fanyamambo, he alluded that, you know what, at the end of the day, this is a political crisis. And equally, we need to sort of focus on the issues that are arising from the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission reconstitution, where he highlighted that, you know what, when it comes to this, we definitely need to have not just goodwill, but equally the support from the government, national government, and the counties as well. So I just wanted your take, Jarvis, on whether this is a legal or political crisis. Which one of the two do you think we are facing currently? Because there are court cases, people mention that we are a highly litigious country, and at the end of the day, political goodwill is quite important if this is to be a success.
Just say it's not just a political problem, it's a political legal problem.
Yeah.
It's political legal because there are critical political issues and interests, and then there are legal issues. For example, the matter now being in court. It is political legal still because it is a constitutional issue. And the only problem is that the tethers of politics seem to be so strong that they have manacled the progress of a legal issue, a constitutional issue, a democratic issue. In fact, where we are right now, we are impeding the perfection of our democracy. And we actually, when you look at it also, we are having members or people within wards, like I've said, people within constituencies, not having their voices heard in the county assemblies, in the National Assembly. We are actually telling them that they're second-class citizens, that they're not worthy of representation because they don't have a representative in the county assemblies or within the National Assembly. And so I think when this matter, I remember that tussle between Raila Odinga and the president initially, even prior to NADCO, and then arriving at a situation where now they have to appoint a selection panel. I think we may want to rethink this issue of politicians holding the country to ransom because of narrow political interests.
Okay.
And so I think once this matter is done, I've had, and we all know that parliamentarians want to amend the constitution for a number of other reasons. There are other critical reasons why we may need an amendment to the constitution, not some flimsy reasons.
And we'll come to those reasons. What's the silver bullet here? You know, you're a mediation lawyer. Is it an out-of-court settlement that will be the panacea in this issue around reconstituting IEBC? Well, what do you think is a solution so Kenyans in Banisa, Magarini, Ugunja, and other areas as well can actually get the representation they deserve in good time?
Thank you. I think, first and foremost, the people who took these matters to court, I know Kalonzo Musyoka has a matter in court about this IEBC. I think these people need to first withdraw these cases. We need to sit down and we need to agree. This thing can be mediated. But the ugly thing about it is that we are not even fighting about IEBC commissioners. We are fighting about the committee, the selection. I mean, the people who will appoint IEBC. That's how far we are from reality. So we first fight about the people who will choose the commission, and then now we start fighting about the commission they'll choose. it's a horrible place. I have always told Kenyans, India is the biggest democracy in the world. Last time they voted, close to 500 million people voted. And their commission has 3 commissioners. Three. We have a country in this world that is struggling to pay her doctors and nurses. Yet we've held the most expensive elections per person. Okay. If you do the hesabus per person, we've been holding the most expensive elections in the world. Why? We have trust issues and we have bad manners. Before we get there, let's fix our bad manners. If you saw what happened in the US and in France, very many people voted via post, via mail. And some of those ballot papers did not even have as many security features as ours did. Ours have got so many security features. They have to be printed abroad. They have to be brought under tight security, because if it's a plain black and white paper like in some European countries, an MCA can get 2 million votes. You just need to set a photocopier to photocopy the whole night and then you vote for yourself. And this is the bad manners we need to get rid of. The sanctity of the vote will not just come from the politicians. It's a reflection of ourselves, that if I had a chance in the dark, would I vote 20 times for someone? Most likely many people will say yes. And so as we point at politicians and as we look at them and say that they have horrible manners in choosing IEBC, they have horrible manners because even the voters have horrible manners. Okay. They are given 500 shillings and they do things that you wouldn't believe that they can do. So we will blame the law. We will say that there's a gap in the law. We will say but at the end of the day, there's just a gap in mannerisms. People have horrible manners. And those horrible manners are affecting the way we are behaving as a country, the way we are voting. And that's why now we are fighting about a selection panel. The amount of resources allocated to our IEBC are enormous compared to what is allocated to big democracies like India. Their commissioners, the 3 of them, would use the local DC or a DO's car if there is equivalent of the same. Government is using what's available. I mean, if you needed to move a commissioner, you'd use the local police station vehicle. I mean, we have so many Subarus abducting people here and there. But here we have a lot of money dedicated to IEBC itself and a lot of resources that is not necessary. All right. And we are only, how many voters? Last time, 22 million, 8 million of whom did not care to vote anyway. So I think we need to rectify that. Okay, interesting. Let's shift focus briefly to what legislators are trying to do in terms of circumventing a court ruling that declared the NG-CDF kitty unconstitutional. And the legislators have proposed to amend the Constitution of Kenya to entrench the kitty and further introduce a Senate Oversight Fund and embed the National Government Affirmative Action Fund into law. There were developments before the legislators took a break for the festivities. Let's just listen in to what they had to say on the floor of the House in regards to their plan to amend the Constitution.
We are seeking for the entrenchment of the National Government Constituency Decentralized Fund in the Constitution, which will ensure that the critical role that the fund currently plays in promoting the participation.
If there is anything that should be supported, and what is being supported by all Kenyans, is National Government CDF Fund.
Funds are always allocated in a good manner and mostly usually favors areas that have voted for government.
Just a sample of the comments on the floor of the House, but it's proper to note that the court said the NG-CDF kitty shall cease to operate on June 30th, 2026. So they gave a little bit of leeway while passing that judgment. Jarvis, your reaction to the court ruling and the subsequent efforts by members of parliament to entrench the kitty into law. Is it a step in the right direction?
I agreed with the Supreme Court when, I think in 2022, rendered a decision that declared the CDF Act 2013 unconstitutional. I still agree with the High Court in its recent determination that the NG-CDF 2015 is unconstitutional. When you look at the reasoning, in fact, I think it's at paragraph 92 and 93 of the Supreme Court judgment, that the reasoning that actually functionality or the utility of CDF as it presently is introduces a third level of government far from the contemplation of the Constitution that creates two levels of government in Article 6 of Article 2 of the Constitution. Now, we know that CDF actually, Jesse, was a good idea. It was a good idea prior to devolution. But like it's always said, a good idea must always yield ground for a better idea. Now, you know also that how parliamentarians, while executing this kitty in the various constituencies, are doing a good job, and it has impacted lives, whether it's paying for scholarships, construction of classrooms, etc. All this is happening within a county where there is a governor. We have got wards, there's ward development fund, we have got MCAs there. Why are people struggling? Everybody wants to have a kitty. Senate wants a kitty. Women rep wants a kitty. MPs want the CDF. And that's when you comparatively, when you look at even India, they have had the MPLAD, a fund that is that can be compared to CDF. But there comes a time when you look at what counties are doing, governors are doing, I think it's important that this fund is given to county governments. Let it be executed, in fact, even by MCAs. Let MCAs have the money that has been going to the CDF to develop the wards. And secondly, we know that MPs, beyond the earlier utility usefulness of the CDF, use it for political reasons, to fight opponents, to try and entrench themselves, and in fact even position themselves for purposes of the successive elections.
Though they argue that there's a board controlling the funds, and
we know very well that that is particularly theoretical. It is MPs themselves, on account of their instructions, that everything within CDF operates.
Okay.
Now, if you look at other places all over the world, whether it's in the UK, whether it's in South Africa, whether it's in the US, when parliamentarians will stick to the primary mandate of representation, oversight, and legislation, and not engaging in these other administrative issues and development issues through CDF, I think they will try to be more serious in doing their work instead of engaging in politics qua ground using CDF.
Okay, interesting. Fanyamambo, as you come in, are MPs threatening devolution? According to Raila Odinga, members of parliament should let go of the billions of funds meant for constituency-based roads so that county governors could manage those resources that are sent to devolved units. So should legislators stick to their functions, among them oversight, or should they equally control funds? Case in point, the road maintenance levy fund. That's the big question. What's your take?
First and foremost, I tend to differ a little bit with my friend Jabaz Bigambo here. The way constitutions were set the world over, and especially us who borrowed from the Commonwealth, the role of the member of parliament was one, representation. That's the main thing, to represent the people. The second one is oversight. And the third one is to make law, legislation. Now, if you're going to represent your people at the National Assembly, where resources are being divided, and the budgets are being drawn, and money is being allocated to various projects, why do you also want to have your own money to go and control? If you are going to oversight, now this is where the problem comes in. If we are going to give MPs money for CDF, then we must remove their oversight role. Because oversight means you come, you summon a cabinet secretary, and you ask them, the Ministry of Education got 600 billion. What have you done with it? Who will oversight MPs? Who will they be responsible to? Who will they be answering to? Who can they be summoned to? They are making it worse because now they are saying even Senate needs to be given a kitty so that it helps them to go and oversight governors and that kind of thing. You are creating a constitutional crisis. You see, when you write something that is unconstitutional inside the Constitution, what you're doing is you're creating now a horrible document. Because you're creating a document that makes you a person with executive authority plus legislative authority. Commonwealth law and the world over, the law has been viewed that there would be the three arms of government. So that we have the executive, we have the legislature, and then we have the judiciary. You cannot be both a member of the executive and a member of the legislature. And that's why even now, we said that members of parliament shall no longer be ministers, cabinet secretaries. The idea was to make sure that you don't have someone who wields executive power and then at the same time they wield representative power or legislative power, which is what our members of parliament are trying to enshrine in the constitution. Is unconstitutional, it cannot happen. And even if they did it, it will be one unconstitutional thing that exists within the constitution. That's a horrible place for it to be. So let them forget NGCDF. And if they're very keen on because even if you take it to the MCAs, again, what you're doing is the same thing. They're supposed to do the 3 roles that MPs do, but at the ward level. So this person now will hold executive authority at the ward level, and then they will hold representative authority at the ward level, who will come and oversight this MCA over the 50, 20, 30 million that they are given to run their ward affairs. So resign as MCA via as governor, resign as MP via as governor, but you cannot have your cake and eat it. And that's where I think the law needs to be very clear. That would cause a mess in the whole idea of separation of powers.
Oh, so MPs are threatening devolution?
They're not threatening devolution. They're threatening common sense. Because common sense has it that you can't have executive power and have legislative. That's common sense the world over. In fact, even anybody looking at Kenya is saying this is the most greedy bunch of human beings we have ever seen. Because what they are suggesting doesn't happen anywhere. It's wrong. It's just enshrining. Now, we shall have a new world order constitutionally where people will be coming for benchmarking here to see how you can create a horrible constitution that makes somebody have executive power and legislative power. They would have to come here and do benchmarking and say, oh my goodness, this is how horrible constitutions are made. We've had a very progressive one. Don't mutilate it.
Javas, if you listen to MPs, and I was listening to what Geoffrey Ruku said recently, is arguing.
Please don't listen to ground. Don't listen to Ruku. Don't.
At the ground, they're arguing that, and this is a common narrative, that if kama nyinyi mnataka scholarships, hii pesa tunawasaidia nayo, yote inatoka kwa NGCDF. So if this thing is scrapped, all the goodness that comes with it goes. And people at the constituency level have definitely seen the good side of this particular fund, vis-a-vis some of the challenges here and there, as you mentioned. So which one supersedes the other? The meaningful development in constituencies that has come through CDF, or should it be superseded that the fact that NGCDF violates the principle of separation of power? Whether you change the writing, that's still the issue.
I agreed with the Institute of Social Accountability versus National Assembly. I agree with Wanjiru Gikonyo versus National Assembly in this dedicated pursuit to ensure that issues of separation of powers are entrenched within our polity. And secondly, that the petition by Wanjiru Gikonyo is well reasoned, actually. That actually we need to have members of parliament retain their primary mandate of purely legislating representation and oversight. Now, I have look at what senators are doing in terms of holding governors to account. Look at senators like Kajwang, etc., doing an exemplary job. That is what they should concentrate on. If members of parliament are primarily keen on issues of scholarships, let them go and join the Ministry of Education and follow up issues to do with scholarships. Now, why can't these issues of scholarships be handled by the governor? The county government can do that through the office of the governor. Secondly, we have got also lots of scholarships that are awarded through the Ministry of Education here, much as there is little transparency in the issues of scholarships. And so I think the argument about scholarships being a good thing and that it will be now taken away is an argument on crutches and should be thrown away so that it collapses. Secondly, we know very well that if it's a question of helping the poor within society, within constituencies, these constituencies, of course, like I've argued, exist within counties. Let this support be given through the office of the governor. And we've got a CEC for education there as well. And scholarships will not come to an end. People will not die because MPs don't have NGCDF. And so I think the argument is so flimsy it should be rejected, it's on a wheelchair, and should be thrown away.
Interesting. I don't know if you hold the same regards to yet another argument that's touching on branding DCI Subarus, that these vehicles need to be branded so you differentiate a professional DCI officer from a thug. Those are the sentiments of one Kiambu Senator Karungo Athangwa. Let's just listen in to what he has to say.
We need to brand DCI Subarus. We need to brand their vehicle. Just like anywhere else, even globally. And we need to differentiate a professional DCI officer and a thug, because how else would you know this Subaru, the men who are in there, how else would you know, is it DCI, is it Kimani Ichung'wah, is it Sudi? Once they are branded, we will increase public trust, we will bring about public recognition, we will even bring about accountability, transparency, we will even deter crime.
Okay, so the senator is proposing changes to the National Police Act and the Traffic Act to compel DCI to brand their vehicles for purposes of accountability and reduce cases of impersonation. Does this proposal hold water?
I think first and foremost, it's a sword that cuts with two edges. On the one hand, it would work because it would deter rogue police officers from just coming and abducting you and taking you away. And then the number plate in front is behind, is different from the one behind. We've seen such funny cars. True. It's a KCR in front, it's a KDA behind. Then what is this amorphous thing that's both on water and on land? But on the other hand, we have criminals. Genuinely, we do have criminals in this country. People who kill, people who maim others, people who do all sorts of horrible things. And then DCI needs to be discreet, and it happens the world over, when they are coming to arrest such criminals. I think where we draw the line is not the arrest of criminals. Where we draw the line is when what is supposed to be a government vehicle picks up someone, and then 1 week later we don't know where they are. I mean, even if someone has killed his wife, which is a bad thing, and there's a lot of femicide happening and we condemn it, let that person be arraigned in court the following day. That's all we are asking for. Yeah. In fact, for us, the standard is not whether you arrested people. No. For us, the standard is whether you arraigned them in court. So arresting people for things, even for suspicion, happens all the time. The problem we have is when many days later we are told we can't account for so-and-so's body, we can't see the person, we don't know whether they are alive, they are dead, they are giving numbers in the 60s. Sometimes we find bodies of people in bags in a dump site and not so far from a police station. That is what is arcing Kenyans. Actually, they can even use a VITS if they want. Let them be discreet if they're holding criminals. And if they abduct anybody that they think is not being very nice to the government, the minimum, the bare minimum, is just present them in court. Okay. That's all we are asking for. If you present them in court, we are good to go. But coming to the other issue, which I must comment about briefly. Sure. I once spoke passionately against bursaries in this country, and people thought I was mad. And I'm glad Senator Karungo Athangwa picked it up in the month of May. And it went all the way to the Speaker, who on the 23rd of August actually did speak about it, where Kenya is spending 104 billion or thereabout. These are the statistics from National Assembly itself on bursaries. Yet when you check how much it costs to run free primary education in this country, it's about 27 billion a year. So what we spend giving people and making an MP a demigod, giving people small checks, is more than what it would cost to run our education for 5 years. So what we need to do is abolish these things and put all that money together and give it evenly to the schools and let the children wake up and know, I don't need to pay school fees. Because why spend 5 times what it costs to run free primary education on things called bursaries that turn MPs into demigods? So it's not an issue of what NGCDF has done. It's an issue of how better it would have been used if that money was being used by people who are using common sense, because these ones are not using common sense. It costs about 800,000 to build a class. If you get a normal contractor, you building a class. But when it's done through NGCDF, the same class costs 2-3 million. So we don't need NGCDF. It makes the cost of construction of classrooms 3-4 times more than it would have been if we did it differently. So abolish it. Abolish it for the fact that it makes the life expensive than it should have been.
Okay, well noted. Javas, your take on branding vehicles?
Senator Thangwa has spoken, but I think he can spend his time in the House to bring better bills. Bills that, for example, would make Kenyans get to know or compel the DCI or compel the police service to do expeditious inquiries and even IPOA, for example, on issues of enforced disappearances, extrajudicial killings. Those are things that are more important. Issues of having DCI vehicles branded, and I would agree with my kindred here, Fayamambo, that by nature of the work about criminal investigation, there is some discreteness that is also very important. So if it's a question of vehicles, sometimes the DCI use motorcycles, sometimes bicycles. Sometimes they walk around, so should they be walking around with jackets branded DCI at the back? So I think that the good senator can use his time in the House quite usefully by coming up with other more important bills. And I agree, for example, even with what President William Ruto said. You remember when he was campaigning, he said that in his administration, issues of extrajudicial executions and forced disappearances will be a thing of the past. What Kenyans want right now is that issues of extrajudicial executions, issues of enforced disappearances, issues of abductions should not be issues that are material in a democracy that is progressive such as ours.
Okay.
And so I think I am diametrically opposed to the proposal by Senator Thangwa that DCI vehicles should be branded for easy visibility and recognition.
You don't think it'll help in the fight against such vices?
It won't change anything.
Yeah.
It won't change anything at all. In fact, the thing is that it will be easy to identify them by criminals and run away and hide, for example. And at times, some criminals that are heavily armed can have this DCI as easy targets because of the easy recognition.
Okay.
So I think we don't need that.
All right. There's yet another controversial statement that was just mentioned this week, and I'd like us to converse it briefly, where the Sports Cabinet Secretary, Kipchumba Murkomen, now claims that the ongoing mass criticism against President William Ruto across all sectors is because of his tribe. He said this on Thursday after gracing the first joint graduation ceremony of Kericho County Vocational Training Centers, where the CS slammed the church, the media, and government critics, accusing them of being tribal in their evaluation of the president's performance so far. So are we being tribal with the criticism forwarded towards the executive? Is it a case of evil spirits? What's your take on this issue?
This administration started by blaming empty coffers for everything that wasn't able to happen. Even when Kenyans couldn't breathe, they said, they are empty coffers. We found empty coffers, so don't ask us questions. But they realized that was not sustainable. So they started blaming Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta for all the problems that were happening in the country. At some point, he had to leave the country and go quietly. Then they realized there's no Uhuru to blame. So they blamed Ford Foundation. Then after Ford Foundation, I remember Isaac Maura blaming the Russian government. After the Russian government, when they ran out of things to blame, now they started blaming intangible, invisible things like people. And now they've gotten to a place where they've discovered you can blame everybody else. But at what point do you blame yourself? At what point do you say, could we have made a mistake? At what point do you own up to anything? Because they're always blaming somebody for something. Now, they said it's tribal. And I thought it was tribal. Until I saw what was happening to Jichopevu in Mombasa. He couldn't speak in his own constituency. So the other Kikuyus who've gone there, Kipchumba Murkomen was in Eldoret over the weekend. And he knows what happened to him at that festival. People from the backyard that he considered a stronghold, that he thought the bulk of those people are Kalenjin, are now yelling at him and shouting at him and saying, no. We've gone across universities. The last 2 weeks have been weeks of graduations. And comrades who come from all parts of the country, in universities spread all over the country. Universities are the most cosmopolitan places, by the way. And those comrades were saying no to this administration. So you still come and say it's tribal? I think you need to accept that things are bad. Things are thick. And the earlier, one of the first steps towards healing, if you have HIV, AIDS, and cancer, is to accept that you are sick. If you keep saying I don't have cancer, then you'll never even take treatment for cancer. This administration has to accept they have terminal cancer, stage 4.5 or 5 if there is, at a seal stage 4. If there's stage 6, they have it. Now, once they accept that they have cancer, then they start asking, what is the treatment for cancer? And how can we be assisted? But when you keep denying and saying, Mimi sina cancer, I don't have that thing. The problem is this doctor who is diagnosing me. So you go to another doctor. You tell the doctor how to treat you. You even tell them, say, I have TB. And the cancer doctor is telling you, no, you have cancer. This administration is sick, and the first step towards healing is to accept that they are sick. And then now people will help. But from where they are, they keep blaming everybody. Now it's people. The next thing, when you get to a place where now you've exhausted everything, now you start blaming intangible things, then you've lost it completely.
Okay, Javas, he seems to allude that the government might be in denial, that, you know what, those who are questioning Kenyans' patriotism, since they're criticizing the government, are actually not Kenyan enough. Talk to us about your take on this, coming in the backdrop of, what has been outside there. The cabinet secretaries, coming out guns blazing, defending government policies, to a point that the minority leader in the National Assembly sort of questions the role of public participation.
Just the polemical discourses in the country today regarding issues to do with the public participation, regarding the issues of criticism of government, are important in a democracy such as ours. And that's why we have the freedoms entrenched in the Constitution, for speech, for opinion, etc. And when it comes to criticism of a government, it can never be marooned, it can never be stopped by anything. But we have got 3 categories of criticism. We have got destructive criticism, we have got constructive criticism, we have got instructive criticism. And as long as you're in public office, there will always be criticism, because people are hawk-eyed on the mandate that they've given you and what you're supposed to deliver by way of the social contract.
Just to take you back, because you've mentioned 3 types of criticism. When the president says that, some Kenyans don't want this airport to be improved, yet they haven't been in an airport before. Sorry to take his words, but what exactly is he pointing towards? Destructive, constructive, or instructive criticism?
Well, it's possible then that when the president spoke to the issue of some people not having set foot at the airport and yet they're criticizing the expansion, it's possible that the president was giving the perspective that people, Kenyans, may want to understand critical issues first, and what is it that entails the broader idea of, for example, the expansion of the airport, without just coming in to criticize for the sake of it. And whether it's the president's remarks or the people's remarks, all of us must be open to discussion. Because this country is ours, the projects are ours, the future that we desire and the development is all ours and for greater good. So let us invite ourselves to always have a discussion. And for example, what the Honorable Junet spoke to about public participation and why government must always be seeking permission. I think it was a bit of an unfortunate remark, because first of all, public participation is a constitutional issue. And whether Honorable Junet and the other person likes it or not, it is here to stay as long as it's in the Constitution. And let me tell you, countries across East Africa, countries across the continent, countries all over the world are admiring the usefulness of public participation that is used in governance in Kenya today. Whether it matters budgeting, whether it matters to do with legislation, because it is for the benefit of the people, and the people must be at the center of it. And so I think our leaders should have the good sense to appreciate that while some of them may think that something like public participation is a time waster, it is important for the people to be involved in affairs about their governance.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting. You share the same sentiments.
I was talking to Kenyans who told me the standards have been set. For you to speak about the airport, you need to visit the airport. So I've seen young people who have come up with a very interesting revolution, if you haven't seen it. So what they are doing is they are paying a cab to take them to the airport. They go through, they pay, they take photos, and then they say, I have been to the airport. Now let me go into my TikTok and speak about the airport. Okay. So we are going to witness, because Gen Zs are very interesting in the way they protest. They have decided they can even hire a shuttle, all of them, and decide they are going to the airport, and there's no law against that. They're not going to throw stones. You just go there carrying a flag. You get to the airport, you take photos, you say we've been to the airport, and you feel there. So it's a new protest line that young people have picked, and it's gaining momentum, and young people are saying, you know what, if the standard has been set that for me to speak about the airport, all I need is to go and visit the airport, then yes, you can just pay for a taxi, go there, visit the airport, take photos within the airport, and then after you've taken photos, post them everywhere, and then say, now I'm qualified to speak about this. I think for Kenyans, and what the president needs to realize, even if there are Kenyans who have not been to the airport, their taxes have been there. And their sweat and the work of their hands and their toil has found its way to that airport. And the money that has been earned through a lot of toil will be paid to Adani if this was to be given to Adani for those number of years. I'm glad that the High Court was still asking for evidence of cancellation of that thing. So I may not, you see, Jesse, it's like someone telling you, for you to speak about HIV/AIDS, you must have it. I don't need to have AIDS for me to tell people AIDS is not good for, you know, we keep cautioning people on how they behave, how they practice things. I don't need to have cancer in my blood for me to tell you, oh, it is painful. I don't have to go and tell the doctor, inject me with hepatitis so that I can tell Kenyans, I have been through hepatitis and hepatitis is bad. Okay. We all knew COVID was bad without all of us having gotten COVID. So we know Adani is bad. We don't all have to get COVID for us to come and say from experience, I've had COVID and COVID is bad.
Yeah. Interesting. So at the end of the day, we have to mention that, you know, the airport has to be upgraded since our neighbors are doing the same, and we have to stand out according to government. But it's leaking.
My friend, let me tell you, and allow me just 30 seconds to say this. Just 30 seconds to say this. I have always told Kenyans, when you see people taking a flight to Canada, for example, or the US or Dubai, they don't all live in Nairobi. And no airplane is boarded like a matatu. If, for example, Eldoret International Airport, and that's why it's called International, or they remove that name there, or Kisumu International Airport, there are so many people who go to Dubai, having paid for a ticket a month in advance. But if you ask them, they'll tell you, I live in Kitale, I live in Kisii, I live in Kericho, I live in Bungoma. They had to plan a trip to Nairobi. Look at the people from the coastal region. A flight to Dubai for them means a trip to Nairobi and then a flight to Dubai. So Mombasa, Kwale, Kilifi, Voi, all those areas are people who can fill a flight because you book a flight even a month or two in advance. All right. So let us first utilize our existing airports in the right way. Sio kutoa Miraa Meru, Hilux pickups are coming here, crashing into people's cars, only to come and load that Miraa here at JKIA. And there's Isiolo Airport that can take Miraa to Mogadishu. We are not utilizing the airports we have in the country properly before we start having a conversation. And by the way, if you see there's congestion here, because this is important, you bring KRA officers to ransack people's bags and waste 15 minutes per passenger, and then you say there's queue and the airport is not able to handle people. Heathrow Airport is not as big as what we have. Heathrow Airport is efficient. So invest first in efficiency. You know, you come to a hospital, you find many people at the reception, and then what do? You increase the size of the reception. The problem is not the size of the reception.
Services. Yes. Okay. Jarvis, PPPs, we need due diligence and a competitive process.
We need due diligence, yes, true.
Yeah.
But in terms of expansion of the airport, I think it's important.
It's a fact,
recently was in Addis. And you will come to a realization that actually it has become the crossroads of the continent. That airport is big and good. And people now crisscrossing the continent prefer going to Addis. Because it is not just expanded, it is modernized. Truth is that we'll need to expand the JKIA.
We can't run away from that.
We can't run away from it. We can make it better. The thing is this, even those persons or the service providers, the contractors, when they're given that job, really let them do a good job. This issue of the shame of the airport leaking is not something really that we should be seeing in a country such as ours and an airport such as JKIA.
True.
Secondly, the issue of public-private partnership is important, and we cannot also now turn away from it. Countries all over the world, in the West, even across the continent here, they are using PPP for advancement and progress, because when you've got investors or partners who want to come in to give that support, the same way we've got, for example, even the expressway here.
Okay.
It is a good idea. What we want is efficient use of this partnership for the benefit of the people, so that the public does not lose money. We want proper transparency and accountability issues. And secondly, what people have been asking for, and I like what the president said during the State of the Nation address, that because of the concerns and information, for example, from partners, the issue of Adani has now to be cancelled. The issue here is having everything on the table for purposes of veracity, for purposes of transparency and accountability, which are values of good governance.
That's quite so. In 30 seconds or so, because we're pressed of time, the president is supposed to deliver a speech this week, Thursday, as the country celebrates Jamhuri Day. There has been criticism that, you know what, there's a disconnect between what's read as per the president's speech and what's felt on the ground. How can the president best feel the pulse of the nation? What should his speech encompass this time round? Of course, apart from the usual around the celebrations, what should he focus on in order to get rid of that disconnect that has been alleged that is there between the leadership and the people on the ground? 30 seconds or so, yeah.
I think first make an apology to people for talking about people and all sorts of things that Kenyans did not want to hear. And number two, accept that this administration has failed in one way or another, and then now ask Kenyans what they want. They keep telling us what they want as an administration. And we keep telling them, you're not listening to us, this is what we want. I think Jamhuri Day should be a game changer. Talk to Kenyans and get to hear what Kenyans want. And let's do what is good for the country.
The State of the Nation address was a very good speech, if you ask me. And it was conversational, and it spoke to real issues. In terms of the president's speech, you know, the president has got every kind of access and information and instruments to get any information across the country for purposes of decision making and leadership. I think it is important that the various ministries, departments, the sagas, etc., should be giving the president appropriate information, real statistics, and also real information of what people are feeling everywhere, whether it's in the wards, the constituencies, everywhere else. Because the president also travels a lot across the country. He knows. People should not cordon off the president from the realities that are happening in the country today. The economy, people want the economy to perform even way better. Sorry. People want money in the pocket, and even spoke to it himself. So in terms of the pulse of the nation, I'm sure the president has the pulse of the nation. What we need is that this president to speak about, and we have seen him making those critical steps, speaking about the concerns of the people and how things are going to become better under his leadership.
Okay, kusema na kutenda as well. Asanteni sana for your time. That's all we had. For our viewers back at home, hope you're adequately informed and have yourself a fantastic start to the week. We were joined by Javas Bigambo, who's a policy and political analyst, and Wakili Fanya Mambo Kinuthia. Always a pleasure to have you with us, gentlemen. That's how we wrap up tonight's edition of Checkpoint. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you're adequately informed. My name is Jesse Rogers. Resha Witi was joining us on sign language interpretation. Good night.